What if one young mind could see the future before the world even knew it was coming? In the mid-1960s, when computers were mysterious machines hidden inside laboratories, a boy in Seattle saw something no one else did. His name was Bill Gates. Restless, curious, and obsessed with logic. He spent endless nights staring at glowing screens, searching for patterns invisible to most. While others played outside, he played with code, a language that would one day speak to billions. He didn't dream of wealth or fame. He dreamed of connection, of giving the world a new way to think. If you enjoy stories that inspire, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more, because the story you're about to hear is not just about a man who built Microsoft. It's about a mind that refused to accept limits. By the time Bill Gates entered Harvard in 1973, his mind was already elsewhere. Surrounded by the sharpest intellects of his generation, he felt strangely out of sync. The university offered prestige, but not purpose. While others debated philosophy and law, Bill spent his nights buried in computer labs, feeding his obsession with logic, speed, and possibility. He wasn't chasing grades, he was chasing the edge of the future. It was during this time that he reconnected with his childhood friend, Paul Allen, another restless mind, fascinated by the idea of a personal computer. The world had never seen such a thing. Computers were massive, cold machines reserved for corporations and universities. But Bill and Paul believed something radical one day. Every home would have a computer of its own. In early 1975, Paul walked into Bill's dorm room holding a magazine with a picture of the Altair 8800 on the cover, a small, box-shaped device that could finally make their dream real. Bill's eyes lit up instantly. To everyone else, it was just another piece of hardware. To him, it was the beginning of a new era. He barely slept for days, writing software for a machine he didn't even own yet. They coded by instinct, by imagination, by sheer faith that the world would soon need what they were building. When their program worked, they sent a demo to the company that made the Altair. To their surprise, they were invited to present it. The journey from Harvard's quiet halls to a noisy Albuquerque office began that same week. There, inside a cramped room filled with coffee cups, cables, and ambition, the first version of Microsoft came to life. Bill knew he couldn't stay in school anymore. The decision terrified his parents, but not him. He wasn't dropping out of education, he was stepping into creation. "If I wait for the world to catch up," he once said, "it'll be too late." Harvard could wait. The future could not. The early days were a mixture of brilliance and exhaustion. Gates demanded perfection from himself and everyone around him. He reviewed every line of code, rewrote entire systems overnight, and argued relentlessly for quality. To outsiders, he looked intense, even ruthless. To those who knew him, it was passion, a consuming need to make technology accessible, simple, and universal. In those moments, he wasn't thinking about profits or fame. He was thinking about power, not the kind that rules nations, but the kind that changes the rhythm of human life. He believed that if he could give people tools to think faster and work smarter, he could help humanity evolve. Still, he was aware of the cost. Long hours replaced friendships. Perfection replaced rest. And yet, through every sleepless night, his conviction only grew stronger that one day, everyone from scientists to students would use software as naturally as they used language. He had no roadmap, no guarantees, and no safety net. Only code, caffeine, and conviction. The risk was enormous, but in Bill's mind, there was never a choice. Either he built the future, or someone else would. That certainty, that unwavering faith in innovation, would soon transform a small startup into the cornerstone of the digital age. The dropout who dared to believe in a world run by software was about to prove that vision is stronger than tradition, and that the ones who change the world are often those who refuse to follow its rules. The world was changing faster than anyone could predict, and at the center of that storm stood a young man with unshakable certainty. By the early 1980s, Bill Gates had turned a small idea in a rented office into a company that would shape the digital frontier. Microsoft was no longer just a startup. It was becoming a revolution. The company's early contracts with IBM opened doors that had once seemed unreachable. When IBM asked Microsoft to create the operating system for its new personal computer, Bill saw an opportunity others overlooked. Instead of selling his code outright, he insisted on retaining the rights to license it. It was a decision that would define the future. MS-DOS became the invisible bridge between hardware and humanity, and Microsoft became the empire that built it. In offices filled with humming computers and the smell of coffee, the young team worked like soldiers on a mission. Bill pushed them beyond their limits, questioning every decision, challenging every assumption. He wasn't cruel, but he was relentless. He believed that every flaw in the system, every inefficiency in the code, was a flaw in the dream itself. His perfectionism was both his greatest strength and his most dangerous obsession. As Microsoft grew, so did Bill's influence. He was no longer the boy who stayed up late to experiment with machines. He was now the man rewriting the rules of global business. Software became the backbone of a new economy, one where knowledge replaced steel and data became the new currency. Bill's mind moved faster than the market could follow. He could see trends years before they emerged. He foresaw a world where every desk, every home, and eventually every pocket would be powered by digital intelligence to his employees. Working under Gates was like living inside a storm. He was demanding, often impatient, but always brilliant. He read every technical document, questioned every line of logic, and wrote memos at 3 in the morning filled with razor-sharp analysis. Those who survived his intensity learned more than they ever imagined possible. Those who couldn't keep up often left in silence. But even they admitted being challenged by Bill Gates was a privilege. Meanwhile, the world outside began to notice the quiet revolution unfolding. Windows, Microsoft's most ambitious project, brought computing to the masses. The dream that once seemed impossible, a computer in every home, was suddenly real. Screens lit up across the globe, and with them, a new civilization began to form. The digital age had arrived. Yet, even as the world celebrated, whispers began to grow louder. Critics accused Microsoft of becoming too powerful, too dominant. Competitors said the company was crushing innovation instead of inspiring it. Governments began to take notice. But Bill didn't see monopolies or control, he saw efficiency, progress, and the natural consequence of having a vision the world wasn't yet ready to match. Success had come quickly, but peace did not follow. Behind the public triumphs, there were moments of solitude and reflection. The more control Bill gained, the more he began to wonder what control really meant. Power had been his goal, but now it was becoming a question, one that would soon define the next chapter of his life. The man who built the digital empire was beginning to ask something far more difficult. What is the purpose of power if it cannot make the world better? By the end of the 1990s, Bill Gates had become one of the most powerful men on Earth. His name was synonymous with technology, progress, and ambition. Microsoft controlled nearly every corner of the digital landscape, and the world that once doubted him now revolved around his inventions. Yet with every victory came a new kind of silence, the silence that follows. When there are no more battles to fight, for years, Gates had lived on a battlefield of ideas. He thrived on challenges, competition, and the relentless pursuit of excellence. But when the US government filed an antitrust lawsuit against Microsoft in 1998, accusing it of monopolistic behavior, the tone of the story changed. The genius who had once been celebrated as a visionary was now portrayed as a symbol of corporate greed. Cameras followed him everywhere. Every word was analyzed, every gesture dissected. For the first time in his life, the man who had controlled everything was losing control. The trial became a spectacle. Gates appeared in court, surrounded by lawyers and flashing lights, his calm demeanor cracking under public scrutiny. The same precision that had built his empire made him seem cold and calculating in front of millions. The public wanted a villain, and he became one. But what no one saw was the storm inside him, a mixture of frustration, guilt, and revelation. He began to question himself in ways he never had before. Was this the legacy he wanted? Was innovation worth the cost of empathy? Had he become so focused on winning that he had forgotten why he started? For a man defined by logic, these questions were unsettling. Logic could fix a machine, but it couldn't fix meaning. When the trial ended, Microsoft survived, but something inside Gates shifted forever. For the first time, he paused to look beyond the circuits and code, beyond the charts and profits. The world he had helped create was connected by technology, but divided by inequality. He began to see the cracks, not in his software, but in humanity itself. He started visiting schools, hospitals, and laboratories. He listened to stories of people whose lives technology had not yet touched, families without access to medicine, children without education, communities trapped by poverty. And in those faces, he found a challenge far greater than any rival corporation could ever present. That was the moment when ambition began to transform into purpose. The same intensity that once built Microsoft began to redirect toward a new mission not to dominate, but to heal. Gates realized that the power he had spent his life building could do more than shape industries. It could change lives. For decades, he had written code to help machines communicate. Now, he wanted to rewrite the human code to make compassion as universal as technology. And that shift, quiet and unseen at first, would become the defining evolution of his life. The year 2000 marked not just the dawn of a new millennium, but the rebirth of Bill Gates himself. The man who had once been defined by ambition was beginning to redefine success. He stepped down as CEO of Microsoft, handing over the reins of the company that had dominated his life for more than 2 decades. For the first time since his teenage years, he paused. And in that stillness, he began to see a different kind of future, one not written in lines of code, but in acts of compassion. Together with his wife, Melinda, he created the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, an organization that would soon become one of the most influential philanthropic forces on Earth. Their goal was not modest. They aimed to fight global inequality, eradicate diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries, and give every child, no matter where they were born, a chance to live and learn. Bill brought to this mission the same analytical mind that had built Microsoft. He studied global health data the way he once studied operating systems, searching for flaws and inefficiencies, asking how to make solutions scalable and sustainable. But this time, the stakes were not market share or competition, they were lives. Gates began traveling the world, not as an executive, but as a student again. He visited hospitals in Africa, rural schools in India, and laboratories working on vaccines for diseases most people in the developed world had never heard of. The encounters changed him. In those faces, he saw the real cost of inequality and the real value of opportunity. Each handshake, each conversation, became a new kind of equation. How many lives could one idea save? How many futures could one vaccine protect? He poured his wealth, energy, and intellect into this mission with the same intensity that once fueled his rise in technology. But now, his competition was not Apple or IBM, it was malaria, hunger, and despair. He read medical reports like software manuals, looking for errors in the system that could be fixed. He spoke with scientists, educators, and farmers, trying to understand how innovation could serve not just profit, but humanity. Not everyone believed in his transformation. Some accused him of trying to buy redemption, of using philanthropy to repair a tarnished image. But those who watched closely saw something different. A man who had finally found meaning beyond mastery, the same stubbornness that had once built an empire would now build in hope. As his foundation grew, it began to influence governments, corporations, and other billionaires. Gates was no longer just a businessman. He had become a catalyst for a new era of giving. His message was simple but profound. Wealth is a responsibility, not a reward. It is not what you own that defines you, but what you choose to do with it. Through this new chapter, he began to see that changing the world didn't require dominance. It required empathy. The greatest power was not control, but contribution. In giving, he had discovered what decades of success could never provide: peace. And somewhere between the spreadsheets of global data and the laughter of children vaccinated through his programs, Bill Gates began to feel something he hadn't known in years: purpose without pressure, a quiet, steady sense that maybe this, not Microsoft, not money, was what he was meant to build all along. Even after stepping away from Microsoft, Bill Gates never truly stopped working. He simply redirected his energy from building technology to understanding humanity. The same curiosity that once drove him to decode software now pushed him to decode the problems of the world. To those who thought he had retired, he smiled quietly, knowing that retirement is for those who stop learning, and he never would. He created a tradition known as Think Week, where he would disappear from the world for days at a time, carrying nothing but books, reports, and his restless mind. In a small wooden cabin surrounded by nature, Gates would read for hours, filling notebooks with ideas about global health, energy, and education. He studied scientific research, climate models, and economic data, looking for connections invisible to most. The solitude that once isolated him now became his greatest tool for clarity. Over the years, those Think Weeks produced ideas that reshaped how governments, scientists, and philanthropists approach the world's most pressing issues. He wrote about pandemics years before they became reality, warning that humanity's next great threat would not come from war, but from a microscopic enemy. He advocated for clean energy innovation long before it became mainstream. Seeing the urgency of climate change as another system in need of redesign, where others saw chaos, he saw code, and he knew that with the right minds and the right focus, even the most complex problems could be solved. But Gates's growth was not only intellectual, it was deeply personal. The man who had once been known for his intensity had learned the value of patience. The young executive who once demanded perfection from everyone around him now spoke about empathy and collaboration. He began to share credit freely, recognizing that progress was never a solo act. He supported young entrepreneurs and scientists, encouraging them to think boldly but ethically. He understood that true leadership was not about control. It was about creating the conditions for others to thrive. In public appearances, Gates's tone became softer, but his vision sharper. He no longer spoke about market dominance. He spoke about planetary survival. When he discussed technology, it was not as a weapon of competition, but as a bridge between privilege and need. He believed that the same creativity that had built computers could now be used to rebuild communities. And through it all, he continued to evolve. Every year brought new lessons, new mistakes, new perspectives. He embraced them with the humility of a lifelong student. In one interview, he said, "Success is a lousy teacher. It seduces smart people into thinking they can't lose." The statement came not from arrogance, but from experience. From a man who had learned that wisdom often grows in the soil of failure, Gates's days became a rhythm of study, strategy, and service. He read biographies, scientific papers, novels, anything that could expand his understanding of what it means to be human. To him, learning was not just a habit, it was a moral duty, because only through understanding could change ever be real in the quiet hours of those Think Weeks, surrounded by books and the sound of wind outside his cabin. Bill Gates found something that all the success in the world had never given him: perspective. He realized that the greatest innovation of his life wasn't a piece of software or a company, it was the ongoing act of learning itself. As the years passed, Bill Gates became more than the face of Microsoft or the symbol of philanthropy. He became a mirror through which humanity could examine its own evolution. The world that once questioned his ambition now looked to him for guidance. He had lived through the birth of the digital age, witnessed its triumphs, and faced its shadows. But what made his story enduring was not the technology he built, it was the transformation he embodied. When Gates speaks today, there is a calm authority in his voice, the kind that comes only from experience and reflection. He no longer measures success in profits or market share, but in lives changed and futures improved. To him, the meaning of wealth is no longer accumulation, it's distribution. Knowledge, money, and opportunity are valuable only when shared. He often reflects on how quickly the world has moved since those early days in the computer lab. The machines that once filled entire rooms now fit in the palm of a hand. The software that began as a dream for accessibility has become the language of modern existence. Bill understands better than anyone that every invention carries a responsibility, that the same tools that connect can also divide, that the same technology that empowers can also isolate. And so, his mission has shifted once more, to ensure that progress never forgets its purpose. In interviews and lectures, he speaks not as a tycoon, but as a teacher. He talks about global cooperation, scientific curiosity, and moral obligation. He encourages young innovators to think beyond success, to design not just for profit, but for people. Technology, he says, is just the beginning. It's what we choose to do with it that defines us. That sentence alone carries the essence of his life. Even in his 60s, Gates continues to work with the same quiet urgency he had in his 20s. He invests in clean energy startups, supports education initiatives, and funds medical research. But his approach is different now, more balanced, more human. He smiles more often, listens more deeply. and speaks with a kind of peace that only comes from understanding one's place in the story of the world. There are moments when he looks back at the path that brought him here, the sleepless nights, the trials, the criticism, the triumphs, and he sees not chaos, but design. Every victory and every failure was part of a larger equation. He realizes that legacy is not built in a single lifetime of achievements, but in the ripples they leave behind. A generation that codes, connects, and collaborates owes part of its rhythm to the young man who once refused to follow the rules. Bill Gates' story reminds us that greatness is not a straight line. It is a series of transformations, from curiosity to ambition, from ambition to wisdom, and from wisdom to purpose. His evolution mirrors our own as a species, learning, creating, failing, adapting, and ultimately striving to do better. The boy who once stared at a glowing screen in a dark school lab could never have imagined the world his curiosity would create. Yet even now, as one of the most influential people alive, Gates knows his work is far from over. Because the true measure of a legacy is not how it ends, but how it continues to inspire others to begin. In the end, the story of Bill Gates is not only about technology or success, it is about transformation. It is the journey of a mind that refused to stop questioning, a man who learned that real progress begins not in the circuits of a computer, but in the conscience of the heart, from restless teenager to global icon. His path was never perfect, but it was profoundly human. He built machines that changed how we work, then devoted his life to changing how we live. He proved that intelligence can build empires, but only empathy can sustain them. The same curiosity that once fueled his ambition now fuels his compassion, and that is perhaps the greatest reinvention of all. As he stands today, surrounded by projects that fight disease, protect the planet, and expand access to education, Gates represents something larger than success. He represents evolution, the ability to grow beyond one's own limits, to learn from mistakes, and to use knowledge for good. His life reminds us that purpose is not found in perfection, but in persistence. And maybe that is the lesson hidden behind every invention, every breakthrough, every dream that begins with doubt that the future belongs to those who dare to imagine it differently, and then dedicate their lives to making it real. So if this story moved you, leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from. And don't forget, every like, comment, and subscription helps the algorithm share more stories that inspire. Thank you for supporting this channel and for being part of a world that believes inspiration still matters, because the true code of humanity is not written in software or silicon. It is written in compassion, in courage, and in our endless capacity to change.